So if you're thinking of coming to Andalucía, you're probably looking at Seville, Malaga. You're probably not thinking of here.
This is Jerez de la Frontera. It's about an hour from the coast and an hour from Seville. Right in the middle of everything tourists come here for. Almost nobody stops here, and that's a shame, because this small city in southern Spain is widely considered the birthplace of flamenco. It bred a line of dancing horses for kings, it gave its name to sherry, a drink half the world's heard of and almost nobody drinks anymore, and it was once, briefly, the richest town in all of Spain. So the question is, whether there's actually a reason to stop here at all. High above the old town, there's a dark little room with a mirror that shows you the whole place at once. There's no screen, no projector, nothing digital at all, and somehow that's enough to throw a live, moving picture of the entire city down onto the table in front of you. It's a camera obscura, the same trick as a pinhole camera, blown up to the size of a room. The whole of Jerez, moving in real time, close enough to watch cars turning corners, and people doing whatever they want on their rooftops and the streets. It's a lot of city, bigger than you'd expect. A proper old town that goes on and on, packed with churches and palaces and the huge blank walls of the old wine warehouses. For a place hardly anyone stops in, there's clearly quite a lot going on down there. So how did a small town nobody's heard of end up the richest in Spain? Sherry. That's the drink this whole city was built on. And its name is a British accident. The story goes that English traders turned up here back in the 1500s, tasted the local wine, and wanted, well, all of it. They just couldn't say Jerez. So they mangled it into Jerez, then sherry, and shipped it home by the barrel. They loved the stuff enough to build a whole trade around it. And for generations, that trade made a handful of families here almost unimaginably rich. Starting with the biggest thing the money built, the Cathedral de San Salvador. A towering hybrid of Gothic, Renaissance and Baroque stone, the whole thing was financed by a special tax, one slapped on every barrel of sherry and brandy shipped out of the city. The Brits drank, stones stacked, and they ran the tax for the best part of a century, and the city has never forgotten who really paid for it. Every September during the Grape Harvest Festival, they still tread fresh grapes on the cathedral steps, a thank you to the wine that built this church. The church cashed in on the wine when it suited them, but nobody cashed in like the winehouses themselves. I toured Bodegas Fundador when I was here. By its own account, the oldest continuous winemaking operation in Jerez. And when you see it, it's pretty massive. The footprint stretches for blocks. Because by the 19th century, when the sherry boom was in full swing, the great bodegas weren't just businesses anymore. They were swallowing the city. They spread block by block, buying up whatever they needed and flattening whatever they didn't. Whole streets simply turned into a warehouse. But taking the city by force was only half of it. People here worked out very early that a story can sell better than the real thing, and nobody sold a story harder than the people selling the wine. The barrels in here are covered in signatures, famous people who've come through over the years. King Alfonso XIII, Charlton Heston, and this guy, Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin, the father of the modern antibiotic, putting his name to a barrel of sherry. And that's kind of funny because for most of his life, this stuff wasn't sold as a drink, it was sold as a medicine. Back in the year 966, the Muslim ruler of southern Spain ordered that the vineyards here were torn out. Wine was forbidden. So the locals didn't argue. They just told him that the grapes weren't for wine at all, and for making ethanol for medicine. He bought the story. The barons never forgot it. They packaged prestige and health around what was, in the end, just fortified wine. And it worked spectacularly. The money came in so fast, it detached these people from reality. When you're that rich, a warehouse the size of a train station starts to feel a bit mundane, and you start looking for something bigger to spend on. In 1785, the original owner left this Baroque estate with strict instructions. The rent was supposed to fund the city's women's hospitals forever. The Sherry Barons took one look at that charity and bought the building for themselves.
Now here's the thing about Jerez money. It's always kind of gone to people's heads, and it didn't start with sherry. This huge stone archway is the Palacio de Riquelme. Back in 1542, a local nobleman started building it out of spite. He wanted a palace grand enough to humiliate every rival family on the square. His ego was bigger than his bank account, and the build bankrupted him, and it was never finished. So it sat here for nearly 500 years, just a magnificent stone front, and nothing behind it. That's the pattern, and when the sherry money arrived, it made the whole thing worse, because these barons had more money than they knew what to do with, and it made them a bit strange. Take this guy, Juan Pedro, heir to half of the Pedro Domecq sherry fortune. Somewhere along the way, he convinced himself he was the rightful heir to an ancient Albanian throne, so he did what any sherry millionaire would do, and declared himself pretender to the crown, and poured Domecq money into pursuing it. It didn't work. He died in Paris in 1914, still not a king.
Their egos spilled into the streets as well. This striking semicircular landmark on the corner, Edificio El Gallo Azul, was built by Domecq in the 1920s, officially a gift to the city, really a monument to themselves. These families didn't just feel like kings, they were tied straight to the top of the country.
This is Miguel Primo de Rivera, the dictator that ruled all of Spain in the 1920s, born here in Jerez, and his family didn't stop there. They ran this town for generations. His son took a turn as mayor of Jerez in the 40s, and his grandson held the exact same office 20 years later. One family, one name, over and over. That's how tight this world was. A handful of families held the vineyards, the palaces, the squares, and one of them ran the whole of the country, right up until the moment the whole thing collapses. The end, when it came, was quick, but it had been coming for a while. Sherry had been slowly going out of fashion for years. The world was drinking beer and wine now, not fortified wine from Spain. Sales were sliding, and for a long time the government propped the whole thing up, pouring in subsidies to keep the bodegas alive and the workers paid. Then in the 80s, Spain was modernising, joining Europe, and it could no longer prop up a dying industry, and the crash everyone had been holding off finally arrived. At its peak, sherry gave 22,000 people here a job. Within a few years, barely 1,000. A city built for a global empire was suddenly far too big for what was left of it, full of grand buildings nobody could afford to use.
And this is about the point I expected to get a bit depressed about Jerez. Empty palaces, a dead trade, a town that everyone skips. But that's when it turned around for me. Because the barons and their money, the palaces, the myths, the crash, that's only half of this city. It's the half that's over. The other half is still here. The buildings that outlasted every regime that ever ran the place. The music, the horses, the old sherry cellars that never closed. That's the Jerez worth stopping for. And people driving past, they don't get to see it. The best place to feel all of that is the oldest thing in the city, the Alcázar. People have been fighting over this hill for 5,000 years, since the Copper Age. But the fortress you walk through now is the Moorish one, from the 12th century. And it's seen some things.
So the town's name with de la Frontera means of the border, but it wasn't the border between Spain and Portugal, which you might think, because we're quite close to that. It was the border between the Muslim Moorish kingdom and the Christian kingdom.
A Baroque palace planted directly on top of a buried Islamic one. When the Christians finally won, they built straight over it. And the old mosque, the last of the 18 the city once had, only survived because they converted it. Moors, Christian kings, dictators, wine barons, everyone who ever ran this city is gone, and the fortress is still standing. That's the thing about Jerez, it outlasts whoever's on top. For all the wealth that flowed through this city, most people here never saw a penny of it. While the barons were funding cathedrals and chasing foreign crowns, the working city just got on with surviving. And it's that Jerez, the one that the money sailed straight past, that ended up making, arguably, the best thing this city has ever produced. Jerez is widely called the birthplace of flamenco. Seville sells flamenco to tour buses. Here, it's still a neighbourhood thing. Now, not everything the wine money touched ended up as an empty shell. Just outside the town is the Royal Andalusian School of Equestrian Art. And unlike the palaces, this one's still breathing. There's a show, the horses kind of dance.
So the whole dancing horse thing wasn't just for fun. It dates back to the 17th century when the horses were trained to kick and jump around defensively in battle. When you get kicked by a horse, I mean, I've never been kicked by a horse, but I imagine it would hurt. They're pretty big. Up to like 8 horses in the ring, dancing to the music, tiptoeing, jumping up in the air, like all 4 legs up in the air. It's really cool, really impressive. Definitely recommend it.
And that's the thing about Jerez now. It hangs on to what it's got left, harder than anywhere else I've been. This is Dama Joana, a cafe inside a 16th century palace. The place enforces a strict, well-known ban on playing reggaeton, a tiny, stubborn defence of their own local sound. This is the Casa Palacio Maria Lucia, and it was the Casino Jerezano, the exclusive private club for the Domecq Diaz family and the Sherry elite. The contrast here is the point. Restored 5-star luxury inside a city where unemployment remains amongst the highest in Spain. So, should you actually stop in Jerez? The city lost its entire fortune, but never once lost itself. The barons spent 300 years selling stories, and when the money went, all the stories went with it. What's left doesn't try to sell you anything, it just is what it is. Look around. The chains haven't taken over here. There's no golden arches on every corner, no identikit high street. The stuff that's everywhere else, somehow, never quite takes here. It can't compete with what's everyday on the street. Instead, you've got Tabancos, old sherry taverns where they pour it straight from the barrel, and someone might just start singing flamenco in the corner. The churrería down the road has been run by the same family since 1923. No seating, sold by the weight in a paper cone. That's the whole city in one shop. It does one thing, does it properly, and has done it for 100 years. And that tells you who exactly Jerez is for. This isn't a beach town, it's not a party town. The people who fly into the Costa del Sol for a week of lager and sunburn, Jerez is quite happy to let them drive straight past. Because what's here is quieter than that, and honestly, kind of feels a bit more grown up. It's sitting out in a plaza in the evening with the light going gold on the stone. It's a sherry bodega older than most countries. It's flamenco in a cellar with no microphone, the way it's meant to sound. It's a city full of gorgeous buildings that no one's roped off. It's a cool, relaxed, sophisticated place that made an absolute fortune, lost a lot, and came out of the other side more comfortable in its own skin than the towns that never had it in the first place. Give it an afternoon and you'll miss all of that. Give it a few days. Nobody talks about Jerez. Honestly, they're lost.